Welcome to the fourth branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the fourth branch program, the place for common sense. Welcome. Today we have two very important topics we will be talking about. First, the notion of blacks in America. We will approach this topic today by looking at a very important aspect of the problem, the prison industry. We will also take a quick look at the road to 2020, in which more than 13 Democrats are fighting to be the one to take on Donald Trump. And that and much more when we return. I am MD, host of the fourth branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Stay with us. We will be right back. If you join us for the first time, welcome. This topic addresses the problem of race relation in America. We have been talking about this particular problem for the past few months. Today, we take a look at a very different aspect of the problem, as the goal is to try to understand every aspect of the problem in order to provide a solution, or at the very least explore solution to the problem. In order to understand the notion of racism, discrimination, prejudice here in the United States, or anywhere for that matter, one must travel far, very far, probably as far back as to the period of colonialism. Put differently, follow the money. Most everything in life, in fact, everything in life seems to hinge on that very old cliche. So you can understand, even in the case of the Russia collusion with the Trump campaign, the first thing that Mueller did was to take a look at the money aspect of the problem. As such, here as well, we have been looking at and been following the path, the money path that is, in order to understand this lingering problem in America. Money, they say, is the root of all evil. Ironic, isn't it? Although proven true millions of times, most everyone, no matter what their level of morality is, no matter what their religious background is, it seems that all strive, and some do not hesitate to commit the most egregious act in order to accumulate wealth. That's probably the reason that even the Bible warned us that money is the root of all evil. The warning didn't seem to matter. Just recently in the news, we had someone, a very wealthy individual, someone by the name of Robert Kraft. Now, Robert Kraft is currently in, well, legal trouble, serious legal trouble. He's been accused, he was busted for soliciting prostitution. On the surface, it shouldn't matter to anyone that a very rich, wealthy individual decides to pay for sex. Prostitution has been around for, well, as long as history has been recording. Even in the Bible, it is mentioned that, well, there are laws, biblical laws, that would stone a prostitute to death if caught. So this is absolutely nothing new about prostitution. So why would a wealthy individual such as Robert Kraft have problem soliciting prostitution? Well, according to law enforcement, it seems that it is a much bigger problem than just soliciting sex. Not to dwell on this particular aspect of the conversation, it looks like Mr. Kraft, being a client soliciting prostitution, women, prostitute, seems to be treated more like slaves than individuals who decide to go into that type of business on their own. Now, I'm going to read for you something that is said by a place that you would never guess that they would go and look at this particular issue that way. Now, this is directly from Fox News. This is not just another celebrity scandal. It's certainly not something to laugh about. Human trafficking is modern day slavery. Keep that in mind as we reading this. Human trafficking is modern day slavery. And the women rescued in this bust are real victims who have difficult recoveries ahead of them. They forced by traffickers to perform sex acts, and these paths, this is where those women work, even prevent them from leaving. And the article on Fox News continue. In short, the wealthiest of the wealthy exploited the weakest of the weak. Kraft and the other buyers, and Fox went to name a few others: John Havens, former president and CEO of Citigroup; John Childs, founder of private equity firm J.W. Childs Associate, may have believed they were committing a victimless crime and hiring sex workers to perform voluntary acts. Disgusting as these realities might be, they're fairly normal in the ugly world of human trafficking. And adding to that is the fact that we don't even have any idea as to the breadth of this problem. Let's pause for a moment to understand what was written on Fox. Human trafficking is modern-day slavery. Now, I don't know if you detected the outrage in the article. It seems that the writer was pretty disgusted by the practice altogether, but even more so when the writer found that wealthy individuals such as Robert Kraft is behind encouraging the practice. Pause for just one moment and understand that there is every reason to be outraged. Now, prostitution in general is dangerous for the prostitute. We know that. We've seen it in movies, and we've heard a lot of stories about prostitutes who just got killed. Even those detectives whose job is to investigate crime, if it's a prostitute, usually the individual would receive less attention. Now, the writer of the article at Fox was right to be outraged, because it is one thing for a grown-up woman decides to do prostitution, whatever the reason is. I'm not here to judge that aspect of anyone's life. It is one thing that's the case, but it is a very different thing when the individual in question doing the prostitute act, the women doing that, are forced into doing that. And we know they are forced because we have many reports, sometimes of teens, underage women, well, girls, and sometimes even those who are not underage, when there is a bust, such was the case in this particular scenario that Robert Kraft is involved, women there expressed fear and felt trapped. In other words, it was not something they were doing on their own. They were literally trapped. They could not leave. They could not call anyone. They were completely detached from society, and they could suffer severe punishment, including death. And Fox writer was right to say human trafficking is modern-day slavery. Rightfully so. In our society, we do not condone human trafficking. We do not condone this type of behavior because, well, it does great harm to individuals. It does great harm to families. It destroys lives. But to those who benefit, they don't care. In fact, they think it's just fine, it's just business. If they kidnap a young girl and force that young girl into prostitution, to them this is just part of the business. They make money, they become rich, and when they have individuals such as Robert Kraft that's feeding the business, they will continue to have this type of problem. Which brings me to our topic of the day, slavery. We talk about human trafficking as modern day slavery. Now, I don't know if you grasp the severity of human trafficking, or if you grasp the outrage Fox's writer expressed in that article. Because human trafficking, no matter how you spin it, no matter what you bring as explanation, cannot be condoned, cannot be explained away, because it is flat out wrong. Besides destroying lives of those women, those girls, but it is very immoral for someone, especially people who are supposed to have a certain level of intelligence, people who have been successful such as Robert Kraft, encouraging such a practice. Now, it is ironic, however, that we express such outrage in human trafficking, for human trafficking. And again, I want to be clear that it is outrage. It is an outrage for anyone to be involved in this type of business, because, as I mentioned, it destroys lives. Now, if we take a step back, in the past, during the period of slavery, what we had for 2 centuries were human trafficking. Blacks, but nevertheless, human trafficking. Now, I don't know which one is worse, taking girls today and force them into prostitution, brutalizing blacks and selling them all over the world into slavery, and when sold into slavery, they were also subjected to all sorts of physical torture, including death. And all was for the sake of, if you guess it, making money, becoming richer, and competing with the Jones. Now we can take comfort that slavery is over. At least that's what it seems. For blacks, however, the journey has just begun. In 1865, Abraham Lincoln signed the executive order, the Emancipation Act, and proclaimed all blacks free. that was a celebration. The Union, the party in the country, the side that was fighting against slavery, won over the Confederate States, the sides which wanted slavery to be around, to stay around. Before the Civil War was even fought, there was already something that was already happening. In 1852, that was the first private prison that was introduced to the nation. When we return, we will establish the connection between what happened to blacks during slavery and what happened beyond slavery, and how we as black continue to suffer under the heavy weight of slavery without the words. Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on Blacks is a topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relation in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then and only then will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. After the Civil War, all blacks were officially free. Slavery was over. As I mentioned earlier, however, in 1852, 13 years before the Civil War was even fought, there was already something that was happening, and it wasn't good. There was the introduction of private prison. What is that? Now, blacks, remember the very notion of individual enriching themselves, getting higher in the financial ladder by exploiting the weak. As written in the Fox's article, the wealthiest of the wealthy exploiting the weakest of the weak. The exploitation of young girls and women into prostitution enriched a small group of people who couldn't care less about the lives that they destroy. In fact, they see it as, well, business. They don't have any level of decency. They don't have any compass, any moral compass that could tell them, you cannot do that to young girls. That could be your daughter, your granddaughter. Similarly, during the period of slavery, you found that there were exactly those same individuals making money, enriching themselves, buying slaves, selling slaves, all for the sake of doing one thing, making money. There was no level or no moral compass, despite the fact that most of those people thought of themselves as Christian, but they were involved in very egregious practices of slavery. In addition to buying and selling, they were also involved in torturing, physical torture of those slaves, all the while going to church on Sundays and praising God for making their lives better, for sending their kids to Ivy League school, for buying businesses, buying lands, and so on, all the while doing human trafficking. Now, with slavery over, then everyone would have thought, well, finally, we will be moving into an era in which those individuals, their descendant, their offspring would finally become better individual, would finally become human being and understand that those type of activities are immoral, to say the least. Unfortunately, that's not really what happened. As I mentioned, in 1852, 13 years before, well, the Emancipation Act, there was already a movement in the way. The introduction of private prison in the country. Now, we know what prisons are for. This is not a place where anybody aspires to go to. This is depriving human of liberty. This is a place where humans are deprived of liberty, of freedom to move about. Now we understand why if someone commits a crime, that individual should be removed from our society and put someplace else. There is no argument there. But the problem that the private jail introduced is blacks were freed from slavery and almost automatically taken from slavery and placed in jail. It is a transition that happened almost immediately. Blacks were taken from being freed slaves and automatically placed in jail. Now, how did that happen? If you recall, after beyond slavery, blacks were deprived of everything. Blacks walk away from the plantation with just the clothes on their back. Absolutely nothing else. But that wasn't the worst of it. If you think for just 1 second, society has always made certain that blacks do not have the opportunity to move from where they're at to higher ground, because every step of the way society has always managed to put in place stumbling block, obstacles, and make certain that blacks just stay, as someone in South Carolina say, in their place. So after Abraham Lincoln signed the executive order, the Emancipation Act, that says all blacks were free, the next course of action was, of course, what do they do? There was nothing, there was no program for them, there was no place for them to go, there was no lodging given to them, there was no money given to them. They were simply said, you were free. Now our society is cruel. Now Abraham Lincoln gets the credit for putting an end to slavery. Now officially slavery ended in 1865, officially. But even up to the 20th century, there were still slaves in America, literally speaking, by the way. But that's not really the subject of the conversation now. Blacks were free. 1865, the government, the President of the United States, signed the Emancipation Act and say, you black people who are slaves, you now are free. That was it. There was no provision made for them. There was nothing given to them. There was absolutely nothing that they had to go on with. What would you do? Now, you may not understand the question yet, but let me give you the picture, the real picture of what really just happened. Blacks were slaves working on plantation for whites, had a hard time, were subjected to all sort of corporal punishment, including even death. And suddenly the President of the United States said, that's it, that's the end. Now granted, it didn't happen that way because there were 4 years of fight between the Confederate States and the Union. Those two sides, the Confederate States were fighting to keep slavery around. The Union, of course, under Abraham Lincoln, was fighting to put an end to slavery. But that details. But imagine for a moment, you working on plantation as a black slave, and you have been all your life. So was the next person, the person next to you, and so on and so forth. And one day you wake up to hear screaming all over the place across different plantations. Especially it was in the South, so those type of news travel pretty quickly. Jubilation. We are no longer slaves. We no longer have to work for the whites to enrich them, because now we can go about living our own lives. Except for one problem. There was no provision made for blacks to go and live their own lives. It was not considered by the government. It was not planned. It was the only thing that was planned for is to put an end to slavery, to the practice. Now you wake up, you were no longer slave. You don't have anywhere to go because you don't have anywhere to go. The government didn't make provision for the slaves to go someplace, to have a place to be. There was no such provision. You don't have anything to wear, well, because you don't have anything to wear. No shoes, no clothes, whatever you have that was on your back, that's all you had. Now, if you've been watching this program, you know that in the north part of the country, it was a little bit better for blacks because there were not as many white slave owners, because of the fact that most of the industry, what provided those white slave owners a reason to fight to keep slavery around is because slaves were enriching them because of the plantation, cotton, sugar, etc., sugar cane, etc. So really farming, those type of activities in the South suggested to the white slave owners who wanted to stay rich, to continue to increase, to accumulate wealth, was to take those blacks who were assets, properties, disposable, and use them in order to continue getting richer and richer. Human trafficking, probably worse than today. Now, as soon as you became free, you don't have anywhere to go. Even traveling to the north, in case you were to say, well, maybe I can travel to the north and there I'll be able to make something out of myself. Well, you need transportation. You don't have money. How do you get there? Well, but most importantly, let's think about how do you survive? Even if you choose to live on the street, even if you choose to just be homeless while walking towards the north, what do you eat in the meantime? Where do you get food? How do you pay for food? There was absolutely no provision for blacks. None. What would you do? What do you think? How would you stay alive? Any idea? Tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. we will have a full program completely dedicated to this topic, to show you the path that blacks had to go through and why the system is the way it is today. Blacks were not free. Blacks were free from slavery. It is a big difference. It is a huge difference, and I will detail for you how white society managed to make certain that blacks live one area, one location, but end up in another location that's not any better than the previous location. From slavery to jail, which one is best? Hi, I am MD, host of the 4th Branch program. War on Blacks is a topic added to the 4th Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relation in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. We will talk next about the road to 2020, the race to become the nominee to take on Donald Trump. You may recall that, first a reminder that tomorrow, once again at 10:30 a.m., we will continue the conversation about institutionalized racism in America. You don't want to miss that, because we will delve into the path that blacks went through and what it means to this generation and future generations of blacks in the country when it comes to race relation. Now, just yesterday or sometime this morning, CBS anchor Dan Rather gave an interview in which he sounded the alarm about the fact that Fox, which I call Fox Opinion, but referred to by most as Fox News, as a propaganda machine for the Trump administration, which resemble Radio Moscow, which was involved in doing exactly the same thing for the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Now, while most people today are talking about this and it becoming more and more obvious, but it is an alarm that I've been sounding for over 4 years now. In fact, since 2015, I've been writing about the fact that Fox, of course, it wasn't for just a president, but it was for the Republican Party. Fox was never a news organization. Fox has never been a news organization. It's been a propaganda machine for a political party. Now, what makes it even more dangerous today is the fact that now it is exclusively for a president. Now, people who support Donald Trump seem to think it's okay. It is not okay for any network, especially a network that wants to go by news, to become the mouthpiece of a president. This is a grave danger for the nation. It is a grave danger for our Constitution. And you may see that if you visit my Twitter account, you may notice that I pin at the very top of my Twitter account, and which has been there for probably a month or two, that there is an announcement that clearly says exactly that Fox is a grave danger for the nation. It has been a grave danger for the nation. And people who simply feel it's okay for a network to continue to be the propaganda machine for a political party, for an individual, it is bad. People seem to want to compare Fox with MSNBC or CNN as if they also bias. Yes, there is going to be bias everywhere. No one argues that. But when you have not bias, a propaganda machine, there is a big difference between an individual who is biased and someone who's simply out there doing one thing and one thing only: promote an individual. And that's what Fox does. We're not talking about bias here. We're talking about propaganda, and that's bad for the country, that's bad for the future generation, that's bad for democracy, and that's bad for the Constitution of the United States. No patriot should stand for that, because sooner or later we will lose what is dear to us, which is our very freedom.
In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies presented to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore.
You may recall that in 2016, the country had to decide between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Ironically, the country decided to elect the least competent individual, the most despicable human being, to the Oval Office. And today we know he is also the most egocentric and the most selfish individual ever, who uses everything and everyone, now including the United States government, to enrich himself, to enrich his family. That was the worst mistake the country made. It is a mistake the country cannot afford to make again. As such, we introduce to you today the road to 2020. We will present to you the candidates who vies to become the nominee for the Democrat Party in order to take on Donald Trump. Now there are a lot of conversation going on, a lot of prediction, a lot of anxiety as to what is going to happen in 2020. As we predicted what would happen in 2016, we're here again to tell you what will happen in 2020. To start the process, we will introduce to you the candidates dancing to the tune, I Want to Be Your Number One. Let's take a look. Let's start with those individuals who have gotten themselves out of the race. Now, if you recall, when before the 2018 midterm election, there were a number of names that were being floated who would consider bidding for the presidency of the United States. There are two names in particular that we did that caught our attention. One was Hillary Clinton, if you recall, did lose to Donald Trump in 2016, and there was Eric Holder. Eric Holder was Mr. Obama's Attorney General, and he did leave before the end of Obama's second term. Those were the group of people that were completely got themselves out of the running. And you may also recall that there was Michael Bloomberg, who was also one individual that everyone thought was going to bid for the presidency of the United States, but it seems that he looked very closely and noticed that there were too many people who
he would have to fight in order to get to the top. So he got himself out of the running. Now, there was also this list, and in this list, as you can see, that there are a few people that up to today they haven't made up their mind. Most specifically, we're talking about Joe Biden. It seems that he's the only one that's keeping everybody in suspense because he had dropped a lot of hints as to what he has in mind. In fact, the last time that Joe Biden cleared the rumors were about the fact that his family gave him the green light, and that was the big obstacle, that was the big hurdle that he had to clear, and he already cleared that hurdle. So we are certain that Joe Biden at any moment will jump into the race. And as to what that would do to the race, well, stay tuned. Now we are left today. This is the list of people currently that have already declared their intention to become the nominee for the Democrat Party, or ultimately the next president of the United States. Now, those people, we will talk about them obviously at length, one by one, in order to give you a sense as to what exactly they will bring to the table, and well, whether they have a chance to make it. So without further ado, let's try to find out exactly what those people will bring to the table for the 2020 election. So let's start with who should we start with? Well, let's see who we can start with. Bernie Sanders, of course. Bernie Sanders need no introduction from anyone. Everybody knows who Bernie Sanders is. You may recall that Bernie Sanders was with us last year. Well, not last year. In 2016, he challenged Hillary Clinton for the nomination of the Democrat Party, and he was routed. And it seemed that it was unfair to him, but that's in the past. Let's take a look at really what that meant. Bernie Sanders is now 77 years old. He is one of the two people that who vie for the presidency of the United States who would be that old. The other one is obviously Joe Biden. But despite his age, we've seen it before. Remember, in 2016, Bernie Sanders seems to have all the energy of a young individual. He seems to be in tune with what the current generation needs or wants, because despite the fact that despite his age, Mr. Sanders was singing all the right tune in terms of saying the right things for the generations, for the young generation. In fact, his campaign was mostly fueled by young people. So that was kind of an interesting take. Now, here's the other thing about Bernie Sanders that hopefully this time he will still be able to make good on, that is the fact that he raised quite a lot of money. If I'm not mistaken, it was to the tune of $120 or $130 million, and all of that money was raised
by individual donation. It did not take a single penny from Super PAC. It did not take from large donors, from individuals with big pocket. It decided that it is a campaign for the people, so it relied exclusively on the people to help him get to the next level. Now, guess what? I guess we must have some interesting issue with this, and we seem to have some technical problem. We'll be right back.
I am MD, host of the 4th Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The 4th Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the 4th Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracies. Stay with us. We will be right back.
We will bring you the remaining candidate vying for the nomination of the Democrat Party, and we will continue to talk about their strengths and their weaknesses when we return next week. But tomorrow, as I mentioned earlier, we will continue the conversation about the state of race relations in America, more specifically showing the path that blacks were put through from slavery to prison, and we will detail all that for you in order to get an understanding as to the predicament blacks are in. I hope you found this presentation useful. Should you have any questions, suggestion, comment, criticism, please do not hesitate to contact us. If you have a topic you would like us to talk about, let us know. Send us that information. We will research it and we will bring it right here on the 4th Branch program, the place for common sense. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. See you tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Good day.
The 4th Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the 4th Branch, live from New York. Good day.
love undercover. I'm just the kind of guy who will love you all over. And you're just the kind of girl who could watch me keel over. The tide is high, but I'm holding on. I wanna be your number one. The tide is high, but I'm